Okay, welcome to segment 4. Let us see what is happening in our country now in terms of specific learning disabilities. As you know, we had an act for persons with disabilities since 1995 with 7 disabilities covered, which did not include specific learning disabilities. However, with the IED or integrated education of disabled persons that was in use since the early 80s, there was always a place given to specific learning disabilities in the IED programs, but not covered by the act or policy. The happy news now is that we have an act that covers 2016 Rights of Persons with Disability Act that tends to include children or persons with specific learning disabilities out of the 21 disabilities that it covers. So, beginning with that, let us see what is it that we have in hand, and all of us, you and us, working with children, how are we going to go ahead helping these children with specific learning disabilities. Yeah. So far there are only a few case studies and success stories documented in Indian conditions, and many share by word of mouth. There is no serious focused concentrated efforts to say what is happening, where we are and where we should be going. So many a time sad stories, they go unidentified, natural dropout from the school, and even at home parents say you are not as good as your brothers and sisters. Wherever they turn, they are ridiculed, but they look like anybody else. Like if it is another visible disability, there used to be a sympathy component towards that. Here there is no visible disability, they look okay, they are unable to do, they are trying their best, but then they get labeled as lazy and mischievous and useless and not good. So one is the organicity of the condition, that the person is having a problem. Second is the social interpretation or misinterpretation of it that leads them to nowhere, if I could say that, and really frustrated youngsters that we find. Many a time it has gone unidentified due to the nature of the condition. If identified, there are educated parents now, in particularly in cities where the parents early in the children's lives, they find that he does not show interest in books, all that we saw in the early screening. The child tends to have one or two of those issues. Immediately the parents tend to find supports, run from pillar to post, where I am going to get the support. There is no one place where you go and here it is, this is what is the condition, this is what we can do for your child. No, we do not have a regulated system so far, and we have a bunch of frustrated parents here, and they tend to see when nothing is available, let me do something on my own, and then the parents initiated NGOs are emerging here and there that we find, including the one through whom you are doing this course right now. And then we have most of the NGOs found in the metro cities, and you do not find support in the other areas. In some metro cities, there are what they call as remedial clinics, where the qualified special educators in specific learning disabilities help the children after the school hours. It is not in all the places affordable by all the parents. Many a time it seems to be a little bit expensive. Some of the parents find it not possible to send the children there. And then we have the families, because of that the families tend to discontinue. For some time they go, it is not like a disease where you go to the hospital, spend a big amount of money, get it corrected, walk out home. This is a condition that is lifelong, as we have seen in the earlier segments. Therefore, this burden, financial burden, is going to be there for a longer time for the parents. Many a time due to non-affordability of the parents, they tend to drop out of the programs, thus negatively impacting the child. Now this act, as I told you earlier, of 2016 is a good news act that has come, and at the government level there are efforts being taken to regulate have the rules and regulations in place so that the children are identified and given the support. See, their definition, as you see here, their definition refers to specific learning disability as a heterogeneous group of conditions wherein there is a deficit in processing language. The language could be spoken or written, that may manifest itself as a difficulty. So, the processing difficulty is not visible, only when it manifests we tend to see what it is. So, that is they have difficulty to listen and comprehend what is told. You remember the chart that the flow chart that we did from input processing and output, that is what it is. So, comprehension is a input related things. So, then speak, read, write, recall and spell and do also the mathematical calculations, and this includes conditions of dyslexia, dysgraphia, dyscalculia, dyspraxia is to do with the movement related perceptual motor issues that the child is likely to have, and also the language related issues. So, as I told you earlier, they are predominantly perception related issue that the children are likely to have. This is our very Indian definition that we have with us. The Western definitions tend to have an exclusionary criteria of all of these existing in the child, but he in spite of having intact vision and hearing, all sensory organs intact and no socio-cultural, linguistic, environmental issues, everything being intact and good teaching in place, and if this persists then the child is likely to have a specific learning disability. Indian definition does not have the exclusionary criteria added to that. Now, when you come to the class 10, the child is not assessed in primary schools for the utilizing the provisions that is given by the government. Normally, the assessment team assesses the child only to give him certain provisions to make it easy for him to appear for class 10, class 12 examinations, and they are generally doing it in the secondary classes as of now. In primary classes, assessments are done by the NGOs and other units, so that remediation is a possibility. So, what am I saying now? Certification purposes assessment happens in the secondary level. Remediation related assessments are done that we have been seeing so far in various NGOs and the units particularly working for persons with specific learning disability, and there has not been any uniform rule as of now. 2016 the act has come, hopefully very soon we will have everything falling in place to identify these children early in their lives and give them the right support that they deserve. Look at this CBSE's notification, the government order. So, 10th standard, when the child is in 10th standard, he can do, the children including those having vision impairment, hearing impairment, spastic children, dyslexic children and autistic children, they can do one language instead of two languages, that is there in the system, and then there is this list of subjects here. From this any 4 they can do. So, that has made life easy for many of the children, even those with intellectual impairment, as you could see. So, if the child is a dyscalculic child, for instance, probably he may be exempted from the mathematics examinations of the class 10 or class 12. He may not do this, he can pick up something else from the rest of the list suitably. And music, painting, all of these you would have already seen about multiple intelligences. This is one way of helping them enhance their skills based on their multiple intelligences. So, this is one thing that I would say is a beautiful beginning that the government has made towards helping the children with specific learning disabilities. Now, one of the things that we should also remember is that DSM is Diagnostic and Statistical Manual revision 5. So, in that when they talk about the specific learning disabilities, this is something theoretically and functionally you need to keep in mind, that there are 3 ABC, you see the 3 segments given in it. A persistent difficulty in learning academic skills despite intervention targeting the areas of difficulty. So, one is reading fluency. So, one is the child's ability to read. then what did you read? When you ask if he is able to give an answer to it, that is his comprehension. Many a time what happens, children with specific learning disability struggle to read the letters that is there in the paper. They have to encode the letters, think what the sound it is going to produce, blend it, read the word, next word, next word, next word. So, the whole attention and focus is so much on the reading, many a time they miss out on comprehending what they have read. So, reading and reading comprehension have to be looked at two things. The same sentence if read out to that same child, maybe he will answer you better, which means he has not struggled to read, but he was only listening and making meaning to it. He is an auditory learner, let us say. So, when you look at the child, you will look for reading fluency as well as reading comprehension in that child. That is encoding, right. Then comes decoding the spelling. When he has to put it in paper, earlier as we have seen, the word has to be broken into its smaller units, blend of consonant and vowel to produce a certain sound, and where there are double T's, where there are single T's, like I said, class, you put it CLAS or CLASS, the sound is the same. So, how does he decide when I put a double S and when I put a single S? So, these are all the things when it comes to writing and spelling, children have issues. DSM-5 says reading, you look for reading fluency, reading comprehension, spelling, difficulties in writing such as grammar, punctuation and organization clarity, number sense and calculation, mathematical application and reasoning, these two. So, the child has persistent is another key word. Once in a while you and I also make spelling errors, I am repeatedly saying that. So, it should be a persistent difficulties in learning academic despite intervention. So, that also tells you, you have got to be a good teacher. If you are a poor teacher and you can't say the child is not learning. So, the despite intervention, that has to be right intervention to the child. If with all this in place, if the child has any of these, number 1, and number 2, the affected academic skills are substantially below the expectation of the individual's age, despite going to school regularly and having the best of supports in learning. If it is below the expectation, and thirdly, it in his school, at work, if he is an adult, at work, and also in the activities in daily living, if it is interferes, as we have seen earlier. And lastly, these two are important to call a person as having specific learning disability. The C component says it is not to be diagnosed. Okay, the label should not be fixed until the onset of school years. Am I contradicting by talking about early screening? No, early screening has to happen. When you do the early screening, you are not labeling him, but you are identifying the A and B that we have seen. Is the child having any of these problems, or earlier as we saw the problems in attention, problem in listening, problem in his motor movement, we are looking at that. We are not labeling him as having specific learning disability, but we start working with the child so that he improves even before he enters the school with the numbers and symbols and everything starts off. So, do not label the child, but work with him. Okay? Before the onset of school years, not to label him. In some individual, the disorder is not apparent until the onset of a demand for higher level skills. So, do not be in a hurry to label the child. DSM-5, we can take it as a absolutely reliable criteria, because this is what all the medical field follows for diagnosis. So, going by this, we will look for the child's learning in terms of reading and writing and arithmetic despite best of environment, learning environment. We will also see how much is the disparity between his expectation level and his functioning right now, but we will not label the child until he is into the school and then a few years after, right. So, this we have to keep in mind. Labeling is not, as we the teachers, what is important for us is that my student has to learn. How am I going to reach him? This is what should be our concern. So, to know how am I going to reach him, I should know what is it that prevents me from reaching him. So, the screening, this is very important. Okay. So, earlier there was this discrepancy component considered. I am sharing this with you because you should know, currently it is not in use, but it is kind of important to keep in mind, so that how we have evolved in the field of SLD you would No, this means that the child's discrepancy between the child's potential and achievement was a pointer towards specific learning disability. How do you find out the potential of the child? The potential is made out by giving the child an intellectual assessment. Intellectual assessment will show his IQ level, where he stands. Usually children with SLD have higher intellectual ability. If it is lower intellectual ability, they get classified as children with intellectual disabilities. So, here are children functioning, this will confirm that the child is having average or above average intelligence. If it is average or above average intelligence, for instance, the same 9-year-old or 10-year-old child should be performing at class 4 level or class 5 level, depending on which part of the calendar he is born, but he is not doing. IQ or intelligence is average or above average, but his functioning is not age appropriate, he is only functioning in reading and writing like a class 2 child, or in arithmetic like a class 1 child. So, there is a discrepancy between the potential, the IQ, and achievement, class performance. This used to be one important diagnostic indicators, right. So, the current thinking has done away with the potential assessment. It says a recent definition in DSM-5 as well as in the IDEA, that is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act in the United States, and many other, it is following one after the other. They have excluded the discrepancy criteria as an indicator and rely more on the teacher assessment, observations, and clinical judgment. So, your role becomes more important now. What you see, how his performance is, has got more validity and more importance. All the more it becomes important for us to be objective and right in working with children having suspected to be having specific learning disabilities. Prior to the rights, the 2016 Act, Rights of Persons with Disability, assessment team in India also has been using the discrepancy criteria. Currently, I think it is still in use in our country in places where the certifications are being done. Such an assessment is done to help children to avail the provisions made by the boards. It does not lead to any other support. So, that is why I said usually it is done couple of years before the child has to appear for the board exam. So, he can get a scribe, a dyslexic child can get a scribe also, that is in the examination provisions. So, to avail of that, they tend to do the assessment and then certify the child to be having specific learning disability. What will happen when the rules and regulations are framed for the Rights of Persons with Disability Acts, which is in process? What will happen? We do not know, because it is still in process. What can you do now is look at your students, see how they are performing, look for factors that cause him to fail in his performance through your screening, and look at each of the factors that you have found may be contributing to this child's difficulty in learning, and try to support him so that that block is removed. After all, as a teacher, you stand here and the child stands there, and here is the content that you need to transfer to him. So, transferring of this content to the child, I am doing, all are receiving, he is not receiving. Why is he not receiving? What is it that I need to do as a teacher? Should I modify the content little bit? Should I modify my process little bit? So, mostly if it is a auditory input I am giving, should I make it little more tactile kinesthetic input of the same content, so he will learn? Look at yourself and your strengths and capabilities, that will help him receive what you are trying to give and try to reach it to the child. Let the acts and policies do their job, let it come. As a teacher right now, let me not wait for anyone to do it, let me do my part, so that the precious years of the child does not go without support. This is something in your control, in our control as teachers. I think we should be doing that. These are some Indian screening tools. Go on the net, you may find more. Tamil Nadu state is in the process of developing one that will be published that has Tamil, and there are other, DALI has Indian languages also. NIMH tool has Indian languages. Neiman's index is widely used for certification purposes. Yeah, so there can be more, and the mathematics tool by RIE Mysore has very neatly sequenced for mathematics. These are some samples, I am not giving all of them, and maybe you can take it as your homework to look for more tools or develop more, whatever. Yeah, these are some. And here is a sample writing of one of the children that I want to show before I close. I was telling you about look for consistency, the child's error. It is a beautiful example of reversal that you are finding in this child. The D has become B, the teacher has written on top, the word is baby. Look what he has done here. Same pattern and consistency. Do you see this? The pattern B and D is consistently. So, you know for this child what you have to do is work on the DB reversal. Look at this, everywhere consistently it is the DB. You see that? So, these are little things you do not need anybody to come and help you with, you will be able to do it on your own with your own screening. Yeah, see this, all are to do with D and B. Pattern, this is what I mean by pattern in the error, and consistency. 4-line writing 5 times the same error has appeared. He does not tend to do it with the P, he tends to do it with the D and B. And it is when it is B, he does it as a D. When it is a D, the D remains D. So much you will learn, look at the paper and so much you will learn about the child. And here is another one. The sentence here goes as I better buy one of those. Look at his writing. Look at the better that he has made. Would, auditory, look at this, classic example of an auditory learner. Oh, this. The word would that you find there is a WOULD would and WOOD would. The word is the same, decoding that we were talking about. It is a classic example of the way he hears, he puts it on the paper. See this? The simple thing that you need to do is do not cross it as wrong and leave it, but see why it has come. Through this you are getting into his head to see how he has processed it. This is very, very important. Another sample of mathematics here. Look what he has done. When you see this, oh, wrong answer, do not cross this. Instead look at this and you are able to see that he has understood something like a carryover because he has made a 0 into a 10, but then he has not done it the next step to do that. Can you see the next step he has done? Non-carryover places he has done it correctly, but carryover places once he does and the next time he has not done, and he is what do you infer from it? He is good with carryover, non-carryover sums, but when it is carryover particularly with 0. So, what will you do when this has happened? You will give him a sum that does not have 0 and see how he processes it, because 0 carryover is altogether slightly different from a number and its carryover, right. So, and 2 zeros next to each other, first one he managed to do, second one he did not know how to go about. You give another sum, here what do you find? He seems to have taken away the smaller number from the, no matter which row it belongs, he has taken away the smaller number from the bigger number uniformly. Can you see? So, what happens here? Don't cross off as mistake and 2 out of 5 is correct. Do not be happy with that kind of quantification. Look at how I got this product, how this boy has managed to get this product, that gives you the pattern. This is a multiplication by 2, instead he has added the 2 to both the numbers on top, this is what he has done. So, he has not he has understood addition means adding, up to that okay, but multiplication and addition difference he has not understood, and he has added the 2 to both the numbers 1 2, but that 1 2 is added to both the numbers. So, what will you do here? You will have to decide how do you teach him to move from addition to multiplication. Some concept of addition is in him, but beyond that he does not have the concept. Look at this. Whereas the second sum 33 into 3 he seems to have done it because there is no carry over to it, and maybe somebody corrected, we do not know he has done it. Again here he tends to, the third sum he tends to have a problem of how to multiply a 0. Number to number 20 he has done, 4 into 5 20 is right, how to multiply a 0 he has a problem. So, you very few sums, and when you see a pattern in the few sums you will see where the child requires remediation, and you do not need a help, you are the queen, you are the king, you the teacher will be able to correct the child, you will not need additional support. All we need to do is look for consistency and pattern in the error, and look at the product, whether it is a spelling like we did the ending E example, whether it is a spelling or whether it is a numbers, how did the child arrive at this? If you identify that, correction becomes easy for you because you are a teacher, you know how to teach. For this child, how to go about, the clue he himself will give by the product that he is presenting. Yeah. So, a few sample sheets from MDA, that this is thanks to MDA for giving the sample sheets by the children, and then you have the references of all that I have been quoting, and a happy ending I suppose, and I feel you as teachers feel more confident in screening your children and not stopping at screening, but also on your own going ahead with remediation based on the screened information that you have gathered. On the one side you will send for assessment and beyond for the child to get the entitlement under the Act of 2016, and on the other side not to wait for anything, continue with your teaching without waiting for a label, whether he is SLD, whether he is not SLD, immaterial to you. He is his name, whatever is his name is his label, continue to teach. Your content and your capability to teach together should reach him, that is all is your objective. As long as you and I do that, I am sure all the stress factors we saw about an adult with SLD are not likely to happen if we are doing our job well. Thank you so much.